US Vice President Mike Pence has indicated that the United States' trajectory when it comes to coronavirus is heading to one similar to Italy. The White House has predicted between 100,000 to 240,000 Americans could die from COVID-19, even if strict social distancing measures are maintained. There are also concerns emergency stockpiles of personal protective equipment are running too low.
We've been working very closely with Dr. Deborah Birx and all of our healthcare experts on the White House Coronavirus Task Force to give the president the very best projections. They call it modeling. We think Italy may be the most comparable area to the United States at this point for a variety of reasons.
President Trump caused a surprise reaction during the daily briefing by suggesting America will soon have more ventilators than it needs.
We're soon going to have more ventilators than we need. We're building thousands of ventilators right now. Now, it takes a period of time to build them. And again, nobody could have known a thing like this could happen. We're building thousands. We will fairly soon be at a point where we have far more than we can use, even after we stockpile for some future catastrophe, which we hope doesn't happen. We're going to be distributing them, the extras, around the world. We'll go to Italy, we'll go to France, we'll go to Spain, which is very...
More than 90% of Americans are facing stay-at-home orders, but President Trump is resisting calls to implement a nationwide lockdown. He's considering a ban on domestic air travel. Let's go live to James Brown, our regular US and international affairs expert, non-resident fellow at the US Studies Centre. James, give us your sense of where things are in the United States. It looks quite frankly, an absolute disaster at so many levels, and just such a contrast to the way we saw some nations in Asia, like Taiwan, Singapore, even China, the way they managed this outbreak.
It's been completely uncoordinated. Different states doing different things. A lot of confusion coming from the very top. Even this morning, we saw in the president's briefing disagreement between him and the vice president on some of the answers. It's a very concerning state of affairs. And speaking to some of my colleagues and friends and contacts in the US, you're seeing some extraordinary things. You're seeing, for example, a US citizen openly carrying firearms around the Capitol in Washington, D.C. So not a lot of confidence in the government's response at this stage.
And so how do you see it playing out now? I mean, we don't know in terms of the health impacts how it plays out. Economic impacts are all over the shop. The markets are so volatile, let alone trying to predict what happens in November. I mean, it is just such a debacle at so many different levels.
Well, I think now we wait for the peak of the virus to hit the US. I mean, the numbers are climbing at a staggering rate. This morning, the president was asked, what about those millions of Americans that don't have any healthcare insurance? What happens to them? He had no answer. He said, we're looking into it. So there will be a continuing increase in numbers. We'll see what sort of impact that has on the US.
And when you look at, I know you spoke about this in an opinion piece this week about China and the role that China played. You think that President Trump is right to a certain extent when it comes to pointing the finger at China?
Look, he is. His instincts on that are correct. His execution is crude, but he's right. The reason we are where we are is because of steps taken by China to cover up the existence of this virus and the lethality and the contagion of this virus for... I've lost you there.
We can still hear you there, James, if you've got us.
I can still hear you. Yep. Look, the steps taken by China to cover up this virus contributed to the fact that it was let slip and infected a number of other countries. At the time, the Chinese Communist Party was saying there were no cases in Wuhan. We know now that more than 2,000 people got on planes from Wuhan to Sydney, for example, some of those bringing the infection here. So the president's right to call attention to that. He's also right to try and pursue cooperation with China at the same time. And it's interesting news today that the US intelligence agencies have released their assessment that China is still covering up the extent of the virus and some of the details of the virus and how it's impacting on their country, which is making this global effort to fight it that much harder.
And James, give us your view, a helicopter view of the geopolitical ramifications of this. Because China, while you're saying they're to blame, and I think most people would agree in terms of the initial covering up and that sort of thing, it's had a massive impact in terms of the spread, and they need to be held accountable for that. But in terms of the way they've responded, they could end up responding so effectively compared to other nations like their most important strategic rival, that being the United States.
Well, let's wait and see, but they certainly have more tools at their disposal to lock down their population. That's something they can do in the blink of an eye without much dissent at the best of times, alone during a public health crisis like this. But you're right, they may well be positioned to get their economy back quickly, to get their country back on its feet more quickly, and that could have an impact on the strategic competition playing out between the US and China. The fact that the US is not in any way leading or cooperating or coordinating with its allies on this crisis will also have an impact on the global power balance. We've got two superpowers here with very different approaches to combating what is a common problem, and we're really going to rely on, I think, countries like India, Korea, the UK, and others banding together with Australia to bring a solution to not only the economic problems we're facing, but also, I think, some of the geostrategic problems that will result from this crisis.
Yeah, they certainly look inevitable, don't they, James? Thanks so much, James Brown from the US Study Centre, as always. Appreciate your insights.